So, before we get into the kind of meat of things, I'd like to just chat a bit about, like a forward about service design. All our speakers today are going to give you lots of details and different kind of angles on it. Everyone's got a slightly different definition, so I thought I'd kind of give you mine, so you know what I'm talking about. I'll use that kind of very classic iceberg metaphor, where this is your company. Probably a big one, like a bank or government or something, where service design is kind of most relevant. And little bit at the top is all your touch points, or everything your customer sees, from your call centers to your apps, etc. I call it the UX or the CX. I won't get into the debate. And the bit underneath is the company that powers it. Of course, there's the people making the apps, the designers, the developers, the product managers. But then you've got the accountants, you've got your CEO, you've got InfoSec, you've got the content makers, everyone, the board. And the big problem you see in a lot of companies is this: is you try, like, your users want one thing, the company really wants a different thing, and it's at odds. And that's when it starts to see things like dark patterns, like, I really want to make you click this, even though it's not good for you, or harvest your data. But it could also be the fact that the way your apps are released is in a way that's good for your accountants because they can do nice budgets, but not so good for users who get an update once a year. So it's like the whole company can be working against what the users really want. And that's where service designers come in, because service designers is all about kind of moving the company so it faces the right way. And that means influencing how people work, but mainly how people think. And that's why one of the thing that's kind of key is culture, is changing the culture. And as service designers, that's kind of what you want to do. And today, what I'm going to talk about is how we could do this by taking inspiration for people who've been changing culture at a different scale, the scale of a country. But first, hi. So I'm Blaise. I'm creative director at the BBC on a team called System and Service Design that looks at the design of all the internal systems, so there's all the staff-facing systems used by editorial teams. I've been there for 2 years, and yeah, because I'm in that team, I get to see all the inside. I get to see all the bottom of the iceberg, because that's why I design for a living. I'm not the only one in this room. So, little caveat. Obviously, so a lot of these things I'm going to say, they're just like reflections I've had recently. It's not the absolute truth. Listen at your own risk. And of course, I need to say that these are my opinions, not those of my employer, especially because we're going to talk about politics. Especially, don't quote me on anything. Yeah, politics is a topic that many designers shy away. It's like the plague. But if you're hoping to change the culture of a company, you just have to embrace it. It's not a dirty word. So as service designers, we should go for it. One kind of key thing that gave me the idea for this talk is this book, which I didn't read, but I read an article about it because I'm lazy. I'm sure it's a great book, but basically it looks at how a lot of the kind of non-violent political movements, actually there's a method to it, and about how they kind of affect change. And I'm thinking like, yeah, we could apply some of this to design. And I know it sounds a bit preposterous, because obviously it's not the same stakes, but it's all about changing culture. So there's some interesting parallels. And the first one that jumped to mind when I read about this was this kind of something that was said about Occupy Wall Street, for example. It was like, oh yeah, lots of noise, lots of stuff, but then nothing changed. It was all for nothing. And it's like he didn't deliver. It was wasted effort. But really it wasn't. It did change the public discourse. Now people talk of the 1%. And it took something that was really fuzzy and made it more tangible. It moved the window a bit. So in design, we hear a lot of this, a lot of like, it didn't get built, it was all for nothing. And I remember like hearing like a really senior person giving advice at a conference to young designers, again like, if the thing didn't go live, don't even put it in your portfolio. It's worth nothing. Well, I think it's wrong. In service design, it is worth something, because essentially what you're doing, is that with your design, you're changing the public discourse, or really the product's discourse in this case. There's a notion of Overton Window. I don't know if anyone knows about it. It's that idea that it's that scope of the possibles, and that's where you kind of want to move it. A company might be thinking here, and you want it to be thinking there, and you just move that window. And it's the same as politics. And how did you do this in design? Well, you've got all the tools. You can do a vision piece, you can do a fancy prototype, you can do a great workshop, you can just sketch an idea, you can do sprint. The idea is to change the culture. And if you want things to happen, you need not just influence the people who are building potentially the thing, but it's also like influence everyone in a company, even people tangentially related. You need to convince everyone, basically. And that's where, if you look at protesters, there's like, I think, things to learn. The first thing interesting is that how you can target one group at a time. For example, when the gay rights movement, they started they tried to push for getting like a gay character in a TV show by convincing Hollywood producers, and that was the first step. And then they moved targets and went now get that one celebrity to come out, and then get the clergy to accept it. It's you just target one group at a time, maybe with different messages, and it snowballs. And designers is the same. You must start with a doodle, with a business analyst on a napkin, and then you have a little hack day with the devs, and then eventually you end up having a big workshop with all the key stakeholders and the CEO, and and it snowballs. So it's all about creating momentum. Timing is quite key. So just like activists try to avoid doing that big kind of camping in the winter because everyone's going to freeze, you can just take a break, push a great idea, an innovative idea. It doesn't stick. Don't run yourself into the ground or burn yourself out. Just take a break, keep it in the back drawer, and then put it out again. Don't just give up and never show it again. You've got that nice prototype, can reuse it once every so often, but don't kind of get your kind of pacing right. The climate will have changed in the company. People will have the culture will have evolved slowly. You can also kind of bounce off an incident or something. And Black Lives Matter started like this. And in designs, what could it be? What could be a kind of little spark that you just latch onto? It could be there's a big fuck up with a certain customer, the one horrible thing where a customer is suing the company or something. You just latch onto it. You're haha, that's my key into solving that one problem. Or it might be that a new CTO gets hired, or that Google's getting into your field of the field of your company. Suddenly things are shaking a bit, and you jump on this. It's good to almost have, and for this it's good to kind of decouple yourself from the timings of your projects. If you're super tied to a delivery roadmap, you don't have the freedom to just jump on something like this. So you should always keep yourself a bit of wiggle room, some leeway. It's almost have a design agenda that might not always tie with the current agenda of the dev teams or the rest of the company, but you keep it at the back of your mind. Obviously, all protesters are really good at making these, and we're designers, so making things catchy, making things easy to remember is a great way to spread a message and to change the culture, because it's the one snappy soundbite that people remember. So we're good at this. If we can make something bold, or maybe like a poster, or even we've got graphic design skills. We can do branding. It's #MeToo. That's a good branding. It's people can latch onto it quite quickly. If it fits onto a sticker that people put on a laptop, even better. Because you're not just trying to convince the one stakeholder. You're trying to convince lots of random people in the company so that it creates a kind of momentum. And that's where you want to cater for people who are going to be quite low involvement. I mean, when you have those big marches, it's people who are they might march against Trump one day. It's but then they go back to watching football or something. They're not hardcore activists. And you need to provide something for this. So maybe it's an open hack day where everyone who's got a passing interest in a topic can join, and then suddenly you've kind of brought them into a circle, but then they go back to their day job. But you've just like you've given them a little idea that they keep, and then you also do things like a regular working group for the more hardcore kind of participants. So you create opportunities for everyone at different levels of company to kind of work to accept that kind of change you're proposing or that kind of new idea. The book talks about like whirlwind moments. So basically, like it happens a lot in politics. This idea that change feels impossible. You feel like you're running against the wall, and then suddenly it changes. I mean, the Berlin Wall seemed impossible; it would break, and then suddenly, boom, it happened. And in your company, it's almost like you be a bit resilient. You know that it's quite often you're in a company, you're like, oh man, all that kind of legacy, nothing's ever going to change. And, well, it's not going to change, and then suddenly it's going to. So it's more like don't lose hope. Don't flick the switch. A lot of designers become jaded, and that's really not a helpful attitude. It's like you have to be like super optimistic. Of course, everyone has seen like the stunts, like the like Peter, where they're like all covered in blood and all that. You could have a kind of design equivalent. Like at the BBC, we're trying to solve like how everything is tagged and our content, metadata, improve the quality of it. And we organized like a big workshop called Tag Fest. We had like stickers. We invited everyone and anyone. And what's really interesting is that it basically puts you on the map. It gives you visibility as a person. It's like you raise your profile. And it's a bit, and now like people go like, oh yeah, I want to do something about tag, and people are like, yeah, ask Blaise, he's the tag guy, and that's the person you want to be. It's essentially like it's a political land grab. You might not have the dev team to do it, but suddenly you've got some kind of legitimacy, you've got some kind of clout. It's a bit like someone who would be leading a protest and they're not an MP, they don't vote on law, but they still get invited on TV to talk about something. So that's kind of what you want to be. And stunts, obviously, they can be a bit divisive. So how far do you want to go? And that's where, for me, there's a really interesting parallel with political things, where you've got, on one hand, the very kind of friendly protesters doing a march, save the polar bears, we're all friendly, nice people, peacefully protesting. And that's one thing. It goes a lot from, is relying a lot on the kind of moral superiority of what you're doing. But then on the other hand, you've got the kind of the activists who like try to like derail a train or something, or blow up a factory. And there's a bit of that good cop, bad cop, where the two complement each other. It's like the protest is better because the activists brought attention to the topic with something quite shocking. But at the same time, the activists are legitimized by the fact that the friendly protesters make their message feel like morally right. And in design, there's a bit of this, like we play a lot on the left-hand side, where we're very friendly, like save the users, and we're very consensual. We don't offend anyone, and we're the good guys in a way. And maybe we should do a bit more of both. And what does that mean? How do you blow stuff up? In design terms. And for me, that's where you can maybe derail a roadmap. Where through design you can shake things up in a way that might ruffle feathers, and we shouldn't shy away from these things, and I think we do too much. So you might just create a prototype that looks so good that it's going to make one of the product managers look bad, because they need to step up their game, and you're not always going to make friends, so you need to balance it with like some really friendly stuff. But I think that's my kind of my key advice, almost as service designers, is to do a bit more kind of activism, because we've been playing nice too long, and I think we need to shake things up a bit. So I'll leave you to think about it, and thank you very much.